Well, hello again, my friends, and welcome once more to the Invisible College. And we've got a really important one for you today. The last lecture I did was called The Mystery of the Garden Tomb. And that was all to do with Jerusalem and the site where many people believe that Jesus was actually buried, where the crucifixion took place and where he was buried. Not the Holy Sepulchre, I have to say. And it was very interesting what's been discovered there and the way that that connects with both the Old Testament and the New Testament and the various prophecies made about the life of this remarkable man Jesus. Whether you believe in Christianity or not, you have to accept, I think, that this was a very remarkable person. And I am a Christian. I'm not one of those Christians that's into a lot of ritual. I can't stand all these big hats and fancy clothes and the whole panoply that goes with priesthoods. I'm not into that at all. But I am into studying the Bible and I'm into studying prophecy and trying to understand how that fits with our human condition on this planet and what our true situation is. Looking at it both from within the context of the scriptures themselves, but also from the cultural situation where those things occurred, and with relevance, recognition of the importance of previous history. So I'm very into pyramids, as you know, and ancient Egypt, and I'm also into modern science in a big way, particularly to do with the electric universe, which I see as the paradigm of the future. So I have a very different kind of view on all these issues, but like you, I suspect, what really motivates me is why are we here? What is our purpose? What is our destiny? What happens to us after death? I really care about that, as people have done for most of history. It's only this sort of last 100 years or so that people have been so negative. They say, well, there's nothing here, you know. Enjoy yourself, have fun while you live, and yeah, you die, you disappear. That's not how people have always thought before. And it's a stupid attitude, I think, because you only have to delve a little bit deeper. And you will start to discover that you do have actual faculties, spiritual faculties, which are not talked about outside of the context of religions. But which need to be considered. Anyway, after that digression, so the last lecture was all about the situation of the Garden Tomb and how the crucifixion had to happen in that very place. I'm not going to go into that lecture in detail. You can watch it. I'll put the link down below. You can watch that lecture. It's a very important lecture. This one is called The Passion of Jesus Written in the Stars, and it's equally important. And it recaps a lot of the information that I was able to uncover, which was, you could say, was revealed to me back in 1994-95, when I was writing a book called Magi. I've got a copy here. Yes. This book, Magi, and I'll recap some of this in another book called Science in the Sky, which I don't think I've not got a copy of that up there. But what it's talking about is there's a Hermetic doctrine, as above, so below. I've repeated this in many different lectures. The idea is that there's the macrocosm and there's the microcosm. The one reflects the other. And what's so extraordinary, when I went into this study, I wanted to find out exactly when did the crucifixion happen? I mean, people are very vague about this. I mean, what are the actual time? Well, it happened in the 1st century. He was about 30, probably around about 30 AD or something. They're vague. But actually, when you go into the actual Gospels and you study them closely, you can work out exactly when it must have taken place. And you work that out partly from there's a census that took place, we're told about, and we're also told about the finishing of Herod's temple, which was finished in 26 AD. Took 40 years to build, and we know that is the year when Jesus began his mission with his baptism. So if you count on 3 years, then that takes you into 29 AD. And so I'd say, well, it must be 29 AD. This seems the appropriate time. It took place at the time of the Passover, and the Passover was the first full moon after the spring equinox. And it's a very odd thing that the spring equinox, there was a moon just shortly before the spring equinox. So the one afterwards was a whole month later, almost as late as it could be. And it turned out that this was actually the 14th of April, as we would call it. So I started working on, there's a program called Sky Globe. So I thought, well, let's have a look and see what the stars are doing at that time. And I found this most remarkable set of coincidences, call it, if you like, reflections in the stars that corresponded with the events on Earth. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So without more ado, this one's called The Passion of Jesus, Written in the Stars. So when did the crucifixion occur? Now, you can see here in this picture, the story of the Passover is to do with time in Egypt when the Israelites were living in Egypt and they wanted to escape with Moses, and Moses had done 9 different what do they call them, curses on the Egyptians, that still they wouldn't release them. And the last one was the death of the firstborn. You probably read this in the Bible, or you maybe heard about it in Bible classes or church or wherever, that an angel of death would go round Egypt killing the firstborn son of everyone, except for those who had a special mark on their doorpost of lamb's blood. And the Jews, or they weren't just the Jews, it's the Israelites, all 12 tribes, were instructed to slaughter lamb, Passover lamb, take the blood and put a mark on the door, so that when the angel came, he would pass over that house, and they would, it would not punish them, but the Egyptians didn't have that mark, so they had, the firstborn sons were slain. I mean, it's a horrible thing, isn't it? But anyway, this angel of death went around, even the Pharaoh's son was slain. So this is why they call it the Passover. It was the angel passed over them. And as a result of this, the Pharaoh said, all right, go on, off you go. We don't need you here. Of course, he changed his mind later, but that's another story. Anyway, we're told it took place the day after the feast of Passover, Last Supper. So the crucifixion takes place on the Friday, and the Passover meal took place on the Thursday. So that's the Last Supper, takes place on the Passover. The Last Supper with Jesus and his disciples. Next day, he's arrested, taken, beaten up, whipped, and goes off and he's crucified. So that all happens on the Friday. So Passover celebrated the release of the Israelites from bondage in Egypt at the time of Moses. Then they had sacrificed lambs and used their blood to mark the crossbeams of their doorways. The angel of death passed over the houses of the Israelites, but slew the firstborn of the Egyptians. Jesus' ministry is generally accepted as having spanned 3 years. The baptism took place in 26 AD, the year the temple was completed. The Passover full moon in that year would have been the 14th of April, so the crucifixion the next day must be on the 15th of April. Jesus is symbolically the sacrificial Lamb of God, whose blood marks the cross, as did that of the paschal lambs on the doors of the houses of the Israelites in Egypt. Right, so he's like a Passover paschal lamb himself, being sacrificed. And the sign INRI is short for Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. That's often you'll find that written on top of a crucifix. And here we can see Jesus was crucified on Golgotha, which means Mount of the Skull. Now, if you watch the previous lecture, as I said, about the Garden Tomb, that is right at Golgotha. So he sacrificed on Golgotha. So there's the Mount of Golgotha. It can still be seen in Jerusalem today. Small eminence with a cliff face that forms from some angles resembles the face of a skull. In an extraordinary way, as we will shortly discover, the events of the crucifixion, as described in the Gospels, were mirrored in the stars. Even the naming of the hill as the skull has significance. So the crucifixion, we're told, took place at noon on the 15th of April, 29 AD. Now, we're looking at just before that, 1125, Jesus is symbolized by the sun, which sits under the last star of Aries, the sheep, right? Aries, the ram. And the sun is positioned right underneath the last star. You can see it there on this diagram. I put a ring round it, round the star and the sun. So that Jesus is symbolized by the sun. And just before noon, the unluckiest star in the sky, which is called Algol, the skull, it's actually the skull of Medusa, the Gorgon, which is being held aloft by Perseus in the Greek myths. Jesus is correspondingly raised on the cross on the hill of the skull, Golgotha. Right, so as they're pushing the cross up there, so this star, this cursed star, the skull of Medusa, which turns everything to stone, is actually at the zenith point, which means directly overhead. The zenith point is exactly over the top, right? So Jesus says there, it's been put up on his cross, and there's the skull right overhead. He's standing on the hill that's called the hill of the skull. I mean, what a coincidence. But there's going to be more, as you will see. Now, at the same time, we're now facing towards the east. We were looking south before. At the same time, the royal star of Regulus in Leo, and you can see constellation of Leo down there on the horizon. The green curved line there marks a horizon using this program. Symbol of the kings of Judah, right? So the kings of Judah were lion kings, right? It's the lion tribe. The 12 tribes all relate to one or another sign of a zodiac, and the tribe of Judah is linked with Leo. So the symbol of the kings of Judah is about to rise in the northeast. And you can see it there, right there, and the sun's right just next to it. And then there's a proclamation of Pilate calling Jesus King of the Jews, the lion tribe, and that's attached to the cross. And I showed you the INRI thing, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And here we see echoed on the horizon the star Regulus, which is the Lionheart star, and it's actually the royal star. And when the sun's conjunct with Leo, is actually the birth of a king. But that's another story as well, to do with the nativity. But we're not going to go into that. We're doing the Passion here. So we see here, as he dies on the cross, so Jesus is supported by his Father in heaven. You frequently see this in paintings. There's the Father in heaven sitting on his throne, holding the cross, his beloved Son being sacrificed, and the Holy Ghost linking the two. So what do we see in the heavens? At 3 p.m, Jesus dies at 3 p.m, 3 hours after he's nailed up. He dies, and directly in the southern sky, you've got Orion. Jesus dies 3 hours after the sun passed noon. At that time, Orion, hermetic symbol of the Father in heaven, has just passed culmination. So the Orion, we've been talking about Orion over and over and over again in these lectures as being connected both with ancient Egypt, which is the prequel to the Bible, as I said, but also with Christianity. The name Orion in Hebrew is Aaron, and Aaron was the high priest, the brother of Moses, and the priesthood were priests of the lineage of Aaron, priests of Orion. So we have this whole connection between Orion, which is a terribly important constellation for us because we're linked to it. But that's going to be in other lectures as well, exactly how that works. So at that time, Orion, hermetic symbol of the Father in heaven, has just passed culmination. Another coincidence at 3 p.m. And now again, we're facing east rather than south. After Jesus dies, Joseph of Arimathea, that's his uncle who's going to bury him. Legend says he used the Holy Grail, the cup or crater of the Last Supper, to catch drops of Jesus' blood. Right? A crater, like a crater, was a big bowl they used to use for mixing wine with water, and then they would dunk it out. I suppose a bit like if you're having a cocktail, you have a cocktail bowl, and you can dunk out your cocktail. The Romans and people of that period, the rich Jews, would pour wine into the bowl and mix it with water. They didn't drink it neat like we do. And sure enough, in the eastern sky, we see, at the moment of Jesus' death, Crater. There's a constellation called Crater, symbolic of the Holy Grail, finishes rising. So the very last star of Crater, which is the bowl, the vessel, is rising over the eastern horizon. Ties in again with this death of Jesus and Joseph of Arimathea collecting some of his blood. I mean, another amazing coincidence. So, what about the resurrection then? Here's another picture of the garden tomb, which we talked about in the previous lecture. And Jesus is said to have resurrected himself shortly before dawn on the third day, when Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb to finish embalming his body, but she finds the tomb is empty. Yeah, we talked about this. She comes to the garden, she's bought some herbs, spices, oil, whatever. She's going to embalm the body. She couldn't wash it properly before because they had to bury it very hurriedly, because they had to get him into that tomb and buried before sunset. Otherwise, it's the start of the Sabbath, and that would be a big sin and crime. So they had to rush. But now the Sabbath is over, she's coming along to finish off. Well, if the first Good Friday took place on the 15th of April, 29 AD, then the first Easter Sunday was on the 17th of April. Now, I know it's the third day, the first day being the crucifixion, the second day he's in the tomb, third day he rises from the dead. So he's not spending 3 whole days there. It's much shorter than that, but it's the third day that he rises. So 17th of April, 29 AD. So what were the stars doing then? Because that's when he's supposed to have resurrected. So here we see the resurrection of Jesus in a painting. There he is, stepping out of the tomb. It's actually not quite like that, is it? But there's the soldiers. The Roman soldiers fell asleep. And he's coming out of the tomb. There's another picture of him again. And notice how he's always shown holding this flag, this banner, which has the red cross on a white background. And Jesus, as he emerges from the tomb, is often shown holding a pole with a banner. It features a red cross on a white background. The white background symbolizes his purity, and the red cross his blood shed on the cross. And this banner symbolizes his victory over death and hence over Satan. So, you know, the red cross on a white background is commonly used by Christians. It was used by the Templars, for example, It's the flag of St. George. It's actually the flag of England. That's our flag, the red cross on a white background, the banner of the resurrection of Jesus coming out of the tomb. And it's commonly used throughout Christianity. The symbolism of the banner is transferred to another symbol for Easter. This is the Lamb and Flag, or Agnus Dei, or Lamb of God. That's what Agnus Dei means. And as a prayer, Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. If you're a Catholic, you'll have seen that prayer many times, said it during the Mass. So here you can see the Lamb and Flag again holding a cross with the banner, the flag with the red cross on the white background. So it's this symbol also written in the stars, this time on the day of the resurrection itself, 17th of April. Well, now, you can see there's the Lamb and Flag. And what do we see here? First of all, we see the constellation of Aries. On the first Easter Sunday, Aries, the sheep, actually it's a ram or lamb, rises just before the sun. The sun is still below the horizon. I'm sorry, this slide's not that clear, the star position, but you can actually see there's Aries, A-R-I for Aries, and below it is the sun, not yet come over the horizon. So Aries, the lamb, is just rising at the horizon, resurrecting, you could say. And what do we see at the zenith point? So the constellation of Cygnus, the Northern Cross, passes through the zenith. So we've actually got the cross, and I said to you before, the zenith point is what's directly overhead. So you can imagine there's the banner, the cross, overhead, and the lamb rising over the horizon. And this gives the symbol of Easter, the Lamb and Flag. Right? So I think that's pretty amazing. But what about the Ascension? Yeah? According to the Bible, on the 40th day, counting Easter Sunday as the first, Jesus ascended into heaven. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? His disciples were left open-mouthed as he disappeared into a cloud. This is actually a picture of the Mount of Olives I've got here. There's a Russian church there, you can see with the onion domes. And there's other churches. There's one at the bottom there, the Church of All Nations, at the Garden of Gethsemane. That's where he's said to have prayed before he was arrested and taken off for a trial and crucifixion. But this whole mound here, mountain, we're looking at it from the Temple Mount. And you can see here that it's actually higher than the Temple Mount, the Mount of Olives. So the Ascension is said to have taken place on top of the Mount of Olives, just to the east of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It's also where Jesus had previously delivered his prophecy for the end times, as recorded in Matthew 24. If you haven't read Matthew chapter 24, you should do. It applies to our own times, I believe. So what about this Ascension? Now you can see him there flying off into the sky, and all the people standing at the base. Oh, what the hell's going on? He's gone. He's floating into heaven. Jesus, we're told in the Bible, spent 40 days on earth after his resurrection. During this time, he appeared to quite a number of people, sometimes in two places at once. Well, that's pretty amazing. And he gave his disciples final instructions and promised them that he would send his comforter to them, i.e. the Holy Spirit or Holy Breath. So he promised that they're going to have this Holy Breath is going to descend on them, that it's going to give them special powers, his powers, and he'll do that once he's gone back to heaven. At the end of this period, he ascended into heaven, rising from the earth and disappearing into a cloud. Now I believe this cloud was most likely a ball of light, seen as he transitioned from the physical world into the spiritual. So this cloud that Jesus disappears into, I believe, is not a physical cloud. It's actually the light that surrounded him. You have to understand that the Latin word for cloud, nimbus, you've probably heard of that in terms of meteorology, the nimbus clouds, is also used for the aura that you see around saints. That's their nimbus, their light, their aura. So I think what's really talking about is Jesus disappearing into the light. He's become a light, a nimbus, and floated off. I don't think it's he's talking about there's a UFO hovering there and off he's beam me up, Scotty, and off he goes into a UFO. And if he floated off into space in his body, there's no air there to breathe. So it's not like that. It's talking about his transition from this world into the next world, the other world, the world of light, where he came from. So this is what it's really talking about. But anyway, let's look and see what the stars have to say for this day. So there we see the stars as they would have been on the 40th day after the resurrection. The resurrection is day 1, so you count on to 40 days. Right? So on the 40th day of the resurrection, Jesus ascends to heaven. And what do we see? On the 40th day, the sun would have been 27th of May, 29 AD. And if you've got the Sky Globe program, you can check this out. On this day, when Jesus goes to the right hand of the Father, the sun is positioned over the right hand of Orion. Now, I keep talking about Orion. This is where the help force is coming from. Is it a coincidence? This position here, where he is over the right hand of Orion, this is what's called the Stargate. I've told you about this in many lectures, that you have the ecliptic, which is where the sun goes day by day. It moves 1 degree a day along the ecliptic. And you have the Milky Way, which is this great band of light, which is actually the galaxy. And the median plane of the Milky Way is like its equator. Imagine looking half onto a disk, and you're looking sideways onto the disk, and the median plane between one side you can call north and the other side south. The plane there is the equator of the Milky Way. And that equator crosses over the ecliptic at 2 positions in the sky. One is in the southern sky. It's actually in Sagittarius, and it's underneath the sting of Scorpio. And that's very close. The position where it crosses is very close to the center of our galaxy. The other side is over the hand of the upstretched hand or club of Orion, where they cross again. And that is, the sun would have been positioned exactly there at that moment. And this was known by the ancients. I've talked about this in many lectures. The Egyptians knew this, the Romans knew this, other people knew this, even the Maya knew this. They call this the gateway to heaven, the Stargate. It's actually in the Book of the Dead. I opened the gate in heaven. This is what it's talking about. So Jesus is actually going to the gate in heaven, symbolically speaking. That's, I told you, the sun symbolizes Jesus in all these different things we've been saying. And there is the sun positioned exactly over the Stargate at Orion, at the right hand of Orion, and he's going to the right hand of his Father. And Orion symbolizes the Father. So, extraordinary. Coincidence? I don't think so. So, this is also the Stargate position through which souls are said to rise to heaven. Now then, we're looking here again across Jerusalem. You can see the Dome of the Rock there, the golden dome on the Temple Mount. And beyond it, you're looking at the Mount of Olives. I'm actually standing on a rooftop in Jerusalem looking across here. And one of the things I noticed, that I was in Jerusalem, and it was 1999, and I was doing research for my book Signs in the Sky, and I was looking across. It was night time. We were having a bit of a party up on the roof of this hotel, and I was looking across. It was a clear night, clear sky, and I suddenly saw there's Orion right over the Mount of Olives. I thought, oh my God, yes, of course it would be, because standing there in Jerusalem, you're looking eastwards across the old city, and the Mount of Olives is to the east of Jerusalem. So things coming up over the east rise over the Mount of Olives. Now, because of the precession of the equinox, and I've discussed this in other places, the constellations kind of move in relationship to the celestial equator, the celestial equator. Celestial equator, if you think of our equator projected onto the sky, you have stars which are to the north of that and stars to the south of that. But the whole heavens, it looks to us as though it's kind of moving and tipping, which causes, I'm sorry if this sounds confusing, but it doesn't need to be. You have to understand that our Earth appears to be doing a kind of wobbly motion. Now, there's various theories to what that's all about, but the effect of that is to make the stars move, and sometimes the constellations appear to be going up, and while other ones are going down. And the constellation of Orion has been moving steadily northwards for the last 13,000 years, roughly, since the last ice age, roughly speaking. Last ice age ended around about 11,000 BC. So 13,000 years later, the Orion has moved upwards. And what's interesting is that it's now at the position where the sun is over the hand of Orion exactly at the time of the summer solstice. I mean, you couldn't make this up. It's true. And I took a party of people out to Egypt and we watched the sun rising on the day of the summer solstice. And as it came up, we were standing behind the Khafra pyramid, the middle one. So the sun would sit on top of the pyramid as we were facing eastwards, and cast no shadow from that pyramid at that moment. Again, symbolic. It's the most important solar monument in Egypt, and none of them know about it. It's crazy. It really is crazy. But the thing is that the constellation of Orion is what we have to look for. And one of the things about this movement is that the belt stars have also, of course, been moving north. And now we're in a position where the topmost star, Mintaka, I'll put this back here, you can see the topmost star rises almost exactly on the equator. So it rises in the east and it goes to the west. And I think this is what Jesus is talking about when he says as lightning goes from the east to the west. Lightning, astrope, I think it's been mistranslated, it should have been asteroids, when you see the stars going from the east to the west. And Orion rises exactly in the east, the belt, and goes through the south, and it sets in the west. So this is kind of one of the signs in the sky that we've been told to look out for. So it now rises in the east and sets in the west. They didn't do that at the time of Jesus, but they do now. Jesus told his disciples that he would return to earth at the end of the age. He said his return would happen the same way he had departed. Right? So he departed from the Mount of Olives, turning into a ball of light, I believe, into his aura. Is he going to come back onto the Mount of Olives as an aura and rematerialize as Jesus? He departed at the time when the sun is at the hand of Orion. So is he going to come back when the sun is at the hand of Orion? I think so, which would be at the time of Midsummer's Day. At the present time, the sun is in this position on the summer solstice, 21st of June. And this is when the sun is at its strength, a description of the Alpha and the Omega at the start of the apocalypse. Now, before we leave that, I took a whole party of people to first of all to Egypt, where we watched, as I say, the sun rising over the Khafra pyramid. Then we went on to Israel, to Jerusalem, and we watched the constellation of Orion rising over the Mount of Olives, with the sun coming, once the sun rose, of course, you couldn't see the stars, but all the planets were positioned around Orion. It's another very important sign in the sky, but that's for another lecture too. But I sort of thought, I wonder if this is going to be the day. Yes, it was the year 2000, and I thought, I want to be there. If Jesus is going to materialize, as a light on the Mount of Olives. I want to be there and see it, but it didn't happen. I was half expecting to see him come tripping down the hill saying, I'm back, but it didn't happen. So we don't know exactly when this is going to happen. It could be, as I say, it takes 72 years for the sun to move 1 degree. So I'm 72 now. It's moved 1 degree since I was born. It could be any day, any year. I think it needs to be fairly soon. Otherwise, the sun's going to move away from that position of Orion, and Orion's going to start moving south again. So I think it must be pretty soon. So that's another sign in the sky that I want to share with you. And one reason why I keep going on about I think this is the end of the age is because I see these signs, reading the stars, not from a point of view of astrology as such. I'm not doing horoscopes or anything like that. Just in terms of symbolism, the symbolism of the signs, the symbolism of the positions of the sun on certain dates, and the positions of the planets as well on certain dates does symbolize certain things. So we're told in the book of Genesis that the stars are there for signs and for seasons. So I'm not being heretical here. I'm often heretical in other ways, but this is exactly what we're told to look for, I believe. So please have a look at the other lecture too, because I find it just extraordinary, the coincidence that all this is going on in the sky over the hill of the skull where the crucifixion and the garden, the tomb where he's buried, which is in the same complex. That's all taking place down on the ground, and that's a huge symbolic meaning, as we discussed in the last lecture. Meanwhile, all this symbolic meaning is going on above. And if that doesn't rock your boat, I don't know what will. If you're still thinking this is all just myth and stupidity, I can't do anything for you. But if not, I think it's time you reassessed Christianity, reassessed the whole idea of this plan, this redemption plan that's happening here on Earth and being coordinated, I think, from Orion. I'm not in any way saying that God is Orion. I don't mean that at all. Again, it's a symbol. But it's been coordinated from there, and that's our link point to the rest of the universe. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you.